The NFL trade deadline has come and passed, and the Washington Commanders make the biggest move of the day. We're breaking it all down on today's edition of Locked On NFL.
The new Locked On NFL. The madman Tyler Rowland is your double shot of NFL espresso with the Locked On local experts on every major story. Get ready, Rowland is revving up. The new Locked On NFL starts now. Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Football fans, welcome in to the Locked On NFL podcast, bringing you a double dose of the NFL's biggest stories with help from our local experts that know your favorite teams like no one else. I am your host, the madman Tyler Rowland, joined today as I am every Wednesday by Locked On NFL expert, the brain, Luke Braun. On today's episode, we're going to break down some of these smaller trades in a little rapid fire segment. We're also going to talk about the Pittsburgh Steelers making two moves on the day, but we're going to start with the biggest trades of the trade deadline. Marshon Lattimore going to the Washington Commanders and Za'Darius Smith going to the Detroit Lions. Before we dive in, thank you for making Locked On NFL your first listen of the day and for being an everydayer here with us at the Locked On Podcast Network, where it is your team every day. Today's trade deadline recap episode is brought to you by PrizePicks. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL. Use the code LockedOnNFL, all lowercase, to win $50 instantly when you play $5. Luke, the big move, the Washington Commanders go get Marshon Lattimore, and for a team that is 6-2 and looks fantastic, I think this was the right play.
Yeah, this is definitely a move becoming of a team that's better than they thought. That maybe didn't think that this was going to be the case. The trade is, they are spending a significant draft pick on it, right? So
They
like this
100% are, yeah. And honestly, I'll throw it to David Harrison from Locked On Commanders to break down the details.
Turns out at least one team is actually all in the NFC East division. This is David Harrison of the Locked On Commanders podcast. And ahead of Tuesday's NFL trade deadline, the big news dropping: Saints cornerback Marshon Lattimore, multi-time Pro Bowl defender, is headed to the DMV. The Washington Commanders reportedly sending a third-round pick to New Orleans in exchange for the super talented cornerback, addressing a big need on their defense. General manager Adam Peters essentially just turned wide receiver Jahan Dotson into cornerback Marshon Lattimore just in time, too. The Washington Commanders face the Philadelphia Eagles 2 weeks from now on Thursday Night Football. For more on this trade, everything going on with the Washington Commanders, check out the Locked On Commanders podcast, 5 days a week, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Obviously, the third-round pick there is the big prize for the Commanders, but not only that, they give up a fourth-round pick, they give up a sixth-round pick, and of course, they're getting back Marshon Lattimore and a fifth-round pick, so a lot of picks swapping hands, but I love this move for Washington. They're better than they expected to be. Like you said, their timeline is 1 year ahead, and I think this is a move that they needed to make and should make at this time with the NFC East wide open.
And with this, the help that their secondary needed, the Commanders defense had kind of been a strike. Like it's now very clear that the Commanders can score points with Jaden Daniels and Terry McLaurin, and everything that's going on there is just humming, right? All cylinders, they can score points. You just need a little bit to make, you just need that defense to be average and make it so it's not just a total shootout every single time. So that the offense doesn't have to be exactly perfect. But I think about this more almost from the Saints perspective.
Yeah.
Where the Saints are going to eat $31 million dead cap next year over getting rid of this contract. This is has been one of their favorite little restructure contracts throughout all of their weird cap stuff. You can listen to Ross Jackson talk about that all the time. Lattimore ain't the guy he used to be.
No.
For them, I think he's a quality corner that can help the Commanders, but from the Saints' perspective, for the money they were spending on him, I think this kind of moment of moving on makes sense, and he's not as expensive to the Commanders as he was to the Saints. So it's definitely a move. I mean, the Saints are packing it in, right? They're totally cutting the engines, fire the coach, trade away the star. It's over, right? I mean, they're 2-7. Like, it's done. And maybe the Saints are finally going to enter into their little, forgive me for calling it a darkness retreat that has been coming since about 2013 for them, where they're going to reset their cap and then they'll be able to go restructure contracts again for the next 20 years.
Well, I talked about this with Lauren Cox on yesterday's episode. My everydayers out there will remember the Saints need to do this. They need to accept their fate and just let it die for a little bit so that they can build it
You
back
got to pay
up.
this one out eventually. It's only ever going to be 1 year. You eventually have to take that 1 year, and it seems like here we go. Now it's now. Yeah.
And I do want to say from the Commander's standpoint, this allows a guy like Mike Sanastrell, the rookie cornerback out of Michigan, to move back inside where most people projected that he would have to go
was he playing
NFL.
Outside?
Yeah. So,
That makes
you're
a ton of
helping yourself
sense.
in multiple ways as well. But the other big move of the day was Zadarius Smith going to the Detroit Lions. I thought this was a good move for the Lions, trying to replace losing Aiden Hutchinson in the trade. Zadarius Smith and a 7th-round pick in 2026 goes to the Browns. The Browns get a 2025 5th-round pick and a 2026 6th-round pick. And we'll throw it to Matt Derry from Locked On Lions to break down his reaction to this one.
Our breaking Detroit Lions news here on Election Day. An early morning trade between the Lions and the Browns. Detroit getting a pass rusher that they desperately need, sending a 5th-round pick this year, a 6th-round pick next year to the Cleveland Browns in exchange for Zadarius Smith. 5 sacks on the year, big guy that can get to the quarterback and has experience in this division, played for both Green Bay and Minnesota. He wants to get a shot at the Packers as they've got a history, Zadarius Smith and Brian Gutekunst and Matt LaFleur. But regardless, Lions need an edge rusher. They go out and get one here on trade deadline day, acquiring Zadarius Smith. They also get a 7th-round pick back from Cleveland, again sending a future 6th-rounder and next year's 5th-rounder. More later today on Locked On Lions.
Now, Zadarius Smith, like Marshawn Lattimore, maybe not the player that he was in his prime, but for a Lions team that has had to blitz a ton since they lost Aiden Hutchinson, having somebody who can win on the outside, not exactly a replacement for Aiden Hutchinson, obviously, but definitely a move the Lions needed to make. And I think it was smart to not kind of sit on their hands, but go out and make the move.
But yeah, I'm torn. On one hand, I thought this was something they would do the day after Aiden Hutchinson got hurt. Right. Cleveland kind of sat on it, hoping they would get another offer. I think that's according to Diana Rossini, if I recall, maybe Josina Anderson. So they kind of sat on it for a little bit, but then eventually the deadline came, nothing better came, and said, okay, Detroit, you can have him. But so on one hand, this is obvious to me, and on the other, it feels like not enough. The Lions pass rush, very designed to funnel everything through Aiden Hutchinson, to give him one-on-ones, get him quality one-on-one opportunities. Everything is for him and him only, and everybody else on that wasn't really there to rush the passer at all. It's how it's built. And so if Zadarius Smith is going to be that guy, if they're going to go all the way back to their Aiden Hutchinson pass rushes and say instead of 97, it's 55, I don't know if Zadarius Smith has it in him to be the whole plane, to kind of be the whole meal, as it were, in the pass rush. They're still going to have to blitz a lot, but it's not like it won't help.
Yeah, well, I think, hopefully the Lions will try to find a middle ground here between how much they've been blitzing without Aiden Hutchinson and what their plan was with Aiden Hutchinson. And hey, you never know, like the Lions have been kind of putting out there. If the Lions get to the Super Bowl, maybe you get Hutch back. You never know what can happen.
I don't think so,
but yeah, I can't count on that either. But either way,
that's a lot.
Hope springs eternal for Detroit Lions fans. I think this was a smart move. And honestly, I like the move from the Browns perspective too. Another team that needs to take their medicine and kind of restock the cupboards and get as many draft picks as they possibly can. But
Andrew Berry really doing a favor to whoever replaces him next year.
100%. That is one way to look at it. But
I mean, you're not keeping your job after this fiasco, right? Like, I feel like it doesn't matter what the Browns do. It's not going to be your job anymore. You're just setting the table for the next guy.
That does remain to be seen, but I understand your skepticism. Now, there is a team out there that made 2 trades on the day, and it's the Pittsburgh Steelers, who, again, are loading up. We'll go over their moves. It's Locked On NFL, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team, every day, trade deadline reaction show. And if you like making trades and controlling your own team, you need to check out the Ultimate Pro Football GM. Remember, our great partner, well, they're back. And they have added some amazing new game mode that I need to tell you about. The game that has you step into the shoes of a football franchise GM and lead it to glory now has a head coach career mode. So on top of getting to build your dynasty by drafting players, signing free agents, making trades, hiring a coaching staff, now you can also call offensive plays during the games as well. Additionally, You'll dig the new tools that you can work with, such as individual training camps, upgraded negotiation system. It's so much fun. It's so realistic. And now it's gotten even better. If you already have it installed, make sure to do an update. But if you don't, make sure that you download the Ultimate Pro Football GM app right now. It's a must-have for all football fans. The Ultimate Pro Football GM app is completely free, has no ads. It's 100% playable offline. Play as you go, as you want, when you want. And here's a special offer for Locked On fans. Use the promo code LOCKEDONNFL in all caps inside the game store to receive a free boost to your franchise. Make sure that you get it, as this perk will jumpstart your play and give you the advantage you need when creating your dynasty. To download the game, just visit ultimate-gm.com, ultimate-gm.com, or just look it up in the App Store. It's Ultimate Pro Football GM. Start your dynasty today. Today's episode is also brought to you by Prize Picks. Prize Picks is the most fun and easiest way to play daily fantasy sports. It's why they have over 10 million members and have awarded billions of dollars in winnings. It's so simple. All you do is pick more or less on at least 2 players for a shot to win up to 100 times your cash. You can run your game all season long on Prize Picks. Just some examples for you. Jamar Chase, 79.5 receiving yards. Patrick Mahomes, 1.5 passing touchdowns. Travis Kelce, 59.5 receiving yards. You get the gist of what I'm saying here. All you do is pick 2 to 6 players and say more or less. Download the Prize Picks app today. Use the code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's the Prize Picks app. Download it today. Use the code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. It's Prize Picks. Run your game. All right, Luke, let's continue today's trade deadline recap edition of Locked On NFL. We talked about the Commanders going all in with Marshawn Lattimore, the Lions replacing Aiden Hutchinson with Zadarius Smith. But now we got a team in the Pittsburgh Steelers that made 2 moves on the day, and they kicked it off by adding a wide receiver that they've been desperately looking for. Chris Carter from Locked On Steelers tells us about that.
Hey everyone, Chris Carter here from the Locked On Steelers podcast with a breaking news update, because the Steelers have made a trade before the deadline to get their number 2 wide receiver, and that number 2 wide receiver is Mike Williams from the New York Jets. Mike Williams coming to the Steelers with 8 years of NFL experience in his 8th year of his NFL career. He has about 166 yards on 12 catches this year, no touchdowns, not really used by the Jets offense, which makes sense why they were willing to move him. But he does have 2 1,000-plus yard seasons in his time with the Chargers, and he does add an outside threat. What does this do for the Steelers? Well, now it adds him to the mix and gives them another outside threat that allows Calvin Austin to remain more as a slot guy, and for them to not have to rely on Van Jefferson as their wide receiver 2 as much. We weren't sure if the Steelers were going to make a trade. They did make a trade, going and getting a veteran to add him to this offense. We'll have more to break down on this move and its impact on Russell Wilson and this offense next to George Pickens, all here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm Chris Carter. Follow us on Twitter and Instagram at Carter Critiques. Check us out on our full show.
So I understand the move here. The Steelers get an outside wide receiver. Russell Wilson is a jump ball merchant, so you get a guy who has had success with that in his career. But, giving up a 5th-round pick for Mike Williams, I think the Jets did a good job with a player that they don't really need. I think the Jets really did a good job with this trade, and the Steelers just, okay, you made the move that you needed to make for another wide receiver, but I'm just not enamored by it.
Yeah, it's such a consolation prize, isn't it?
Yes.
The 5th-round pick, I don't really care. I mean, I think
Brandon
it's fine.
Ayuk, to Cooper Kupp, to Mike
Right,
Williams.
they were in every little trade talk about everybody, and at the end of the day, they are like, okay, I guess we'll take Mike Williams and whatever's left of him, as he is the odd man out on a Jets offense that is so bad people are getting fired. Yep. It really didn't work out, and part of that was because Mike Williams wasn't adjusting to Aaron Rodgers' passes the way he should. So maybe if we're just throwing up moonballs is better. Maybe that's the deal the Steelers want to go to. Maybe it's a better fit there. I do think I feel like it is good for Mike Williams. I feel like it's better for the Steelers than doing nothing. Better for the Jets than doing nothing. But it's so low octane that you kind of wish it was more.
Yeah, I don't think that it's enough to push them to a new level. Like, I don't think about the Steelers any differently now because they added Mike Williams than I did before. But that wasn't the only trade that they made. On the defensive side of the ball, the Pittsburgh Steelers added strength on strength. They go out and send a 7th round pick to the Green Bay Packers, and they get Preston Smith. Now, the way that I choose to look at this, Luke, I like the Preston Smith move more than I like the Mike Williams move. So at the end of the day, the Steelers sent out a 5th and a 7th rounder, and they get back Mike Williams and Preston Smith. I'm going to pretend that Preston Smith was the 5th rounder and Mike Williams was the 7th rounder. And I think that makes it go down a little bit smoother. But Preston Smith at 32, again, another example of a player that maybe not who he was a couple of years ago, but when you add him to TJ Watt, you add him to Alex Highsmith, you add him to Cam Hayward, Nick Herbig. I mean, they don't need Preston Smith to be the player that he was a couple of years ago. It's just strength on strength. So I like that move for the Steelers more than the Mike Williams one.
I think the price was right, which is maybe damnation by faint praise. I don't think Preston Smith had anything left, at least from what I watched of him against the Vikings and in preparing for the Packers-Vikings game that happened in September. I don't think that he was very good anymore. And I don't think that he gets a lot of reps in Pittsburgh because of all those horses that they get. I think he's just another body to rotate around, another veteran to rotate around, and another team that's maybe doing a little better than they thought. That is just going to bring in another thing. But it's very low octane. Like, I feel like the Steelers took over a whole bunch of headlines and like made guys like Chris Carter go insane trying to cover all this stuff to like not really change the outlook of their team very much. I don't know. I don't feel very different about the Steelers at all.
I think it's a bit of a proactive move, though. They have had, like, Alex Highsmith has had injuries that he's dealt with the last few years. Nick Herbig got hurt a little bit earlier this year, and I think they're just trying to, kind of reinforce themselves now before it's too late. But I agree with you. I don't see the Steelers in a different way than I did before today's action. Now, another team that I don't really see differently, but I didn't see them very well in the first place is the Dallas Cowboys, who make probably the worst trade of the day. I haven't seen one single person give a positive spin on the move. They trade for Jonathan Mingo, who is in his 2nd year. He's been a bust for the Carolina Panthers. And Landon McCool from Locked On Cowboys talked about the move.
The Dallas Cowboys, desperate to change the narrative and the direction of their season, make a trade that will change neither. Hi, I'm Landon McCool with the Locked On Cowboys podcast, and the Dallas Cowboys have sent a 4th-round pick to the Carolina Panthers for Jonathan Mingo and a 7th-round pick in return. And Dallas loved Jonathan Mingo coming into the draft when he was selected 2 years ago by the Carolina Panthers. They had a high grade on him. They had him in for a visit. But this just feels like an overpay at a position that is not going to move the needle for this year. You hope that maybe can be a developmental guy for the years of the coming seasons. He's on a cheap, rookie deal for the next 2.5 years, but he has done almost nothing since being in the NFL and is really a long shot to kind of be a contributor soon. So we'll have more on this all week on the Locked On Cowboys podcast, and make sure you check out the other podcasts on the Locked On NFL Network.
Listen, he didn't do anything at Ole Miss either. So it's just a player that's never put up any sort of production who people are like, this is perplexing. What a great move by Carolina to ship this dude off for a 4th-round pick. I mean,
got rid of Deontay Johnson too.
I know. I mean, he got more than Deontay Johnson. It's just absolutely crazy. The Cowboys paid more for Jonathan Mingo than they got when they traded Amari Cooper to the Browns. Now, I know the salary cap and, the contract was part of that as well, but this is just an absolute head scratcher, especially with Dak Prescott going on IR, which was announced earlier in the morning. Like, I have
panic.
No way to rationalize this. I feel so bad for Cowboys fans.
It's panic. That's what it is. It's panic, and I think it's also clinging to a draft grade. This guy, I mean, he went in the 2nd round, right? Like, this guy had a draft grade that was born of, and I remember this, was born of people essentially saying, he was in a weird college scheme that didn't throw a lot. That wasn't his fault. He's actually good when he runs a route and all that. And that got him to the second round, right? And then you get size and measurables and all this. It got him to the second round.
Yeah.
So
he's AJ
Cowboys,
Brown, Luke. Duh.
Yeah, right. Ole Miss, come on. So the Cowboys see that. They have that draft grade still. It's only year 2, and they go, maybe we can fix him. I think that's all that is. But obviously the position that they're in, and this is, I think, the mistake we make with the trade deadline, is that it's not the NBA. It's not a moment where everybody looks in the mirror and says, am I a Super Bowl contender? And if not, I sell. And if yes, I buy. They don't go along those lines. You get teams like the Cowboys that are just constantly trying to get better. 2 years left on the deal, right? Like this is something that counts for next year too. It's not just an 8-game rental. So I get it a little bit more. It's just that a 4th round pick for that's insane. This guy clearly didn't have what you thought he had. Give up your draft prior and keep your 4th round pick, dude. What? Come on now.
And sometimes you just have to look at the red flags here. Carolina is a team who in theory would want a player like Jonathan Mingo. You know what I mean? Like for them to get rid of him and give up on him when they need to stack talent as much as possible. I mean, in theory, the Cowboys did need another wide receiver. If Jonathan Mingo were to work out, he's a big height, weight, speed, physical guy. He pairs well with CeeDee Lamb. Like you could understand that, but this is one of those things where I think you just refuse to admit you were wrong. And like we were all wrong about the draft analysis of Jonathan Mingo, and it's just very confusing.
Wrong about like half of them. Like it's how it goes.
Right. It's a crapshoot. So a great move by Carolina though to get that kind of value back for a player that's just been an outright disappointment. But
they can start their 3rd rebuild in as many years. Good luck. Hope you don't get the 1st overall pick again.
Yeah,
I don't respect you, Carolina. I'm not going to respect you for getting another 4th round pick. Fix your franchise. You're the worst team in the league, and you have been since the pandemic ended. I mean, come on.
Right. Literally 3 years in a row now. They're probably going to be the worst team, but they got to win. Luke, okay, they won last week. Give them a little bit of a break,
which is so embarrassing. They fired everyone, and they're going into fire sale mode. I don't respect you, Carolina.
I love it. We're drinking haterade here on the Wednesday edition of Locked On NFL. But time to rapid fire some of the other trades in the NFL, good or bad. We'll tell you. Do want to let you guys know that today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. Hey, NFL fans, get ready to tackle the second half of the NFL season with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of a game, you can go check out the latest stats. You can view live play-by-play and so much more on the same exact page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. All right, Luke, we're going to cap off today's edition of the Locked On NFL podcast. It is an NFL trade deadline recap. We went over all the biggest deals of the day, but there are a lot of smaller deals in here that took place as well. I just want to say first and foremost that I enjoy that the NFL has more trades at the trade deadline now. It feels like here in the last few years, we actually get quite a bit of action on trade deadline day. I think a lot of that has to do with the NFL moving the trade deadline back a little bit so teams understand more who they are. But, you know, an NBA trade deadline is so much fun. And for the NFL to kind of, you know, it reminds me of Shang Tsung from Mortal Kombat, where the NFL just slowly is stealing the NBA's soul. Everything that you do, we're going to find a way to do it, and we're going to find a way to do it better. And I just enjoyed the trade deadline this year. More important than anything else. But some quick rapid fire trades here for you, Luke. Baron Browning to the Arizona Cardinals for a 2025 6th round pick. The Broncos get the pick. The Cardinals get the edge rusher that they've been looking for. I personally really like this move for the Cardinals, especially after a good pass rush performance. I like Baron Browning. Personally, I'm kind of surprised by how cheap it was. Yes or no? You like the trade?
I like it for the Cardinals. For the Broncos, I don't know. I guess like you can never have too many edge rushers, and I always felt like Baron Browning was an okay player. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong about that, but I like that for the Cardinals to get a little bit more of a threat on their defense than kind of, you know, who do you game plan around? Budda Baker, and that's kind of it. Let's add somebody else that can really get after the quarterback.
And for the Broncos, a team that's 5-3, who I think can make the playoffs, like it was a bit confusing. Khalil Herbert goes to the Cincinnati Bengals. The Bengals give up a 7th-round pick in this year's draft and get Khalil Herbert from the Chicago Bears. I love this move for the Bengals. Zach Moss just had a neck injury. He's out indefinitely. Chase Brown is a guy who has been good, but he's a little bit banged up as well. Khalil Herbert was criminally underused by the Chicago Bears. For a 7th-round pick, I like this move. What say you?
I like it for the Bears too. I think this is a Roschon Johnson thing with DeAndre Swift struggling mightily, liking Roschon Johnson a little bit more, getting something back for Khalil Herbert. But I think that's more of an embarrassment of riches thing where they felt like they could flip a little bit of value on that and then, take advantage of a team that had a need.
Yeah, I guess I'm with you there. That's fair enough. I don't know that, and I mean DeAndre Swift is struggling so bad in pass protection
He's dreadful
right now. But his skill set is not something that you can replace with Roschon Johnson as a pass catcher. So I don't know if that actually works. But moving on.
That's fine.
Tre'Davious White, the former All-Pro from the Buffalo Bills, now with the Los Angeles Rams, being traded to the Baltimore Ravens. The Ravens get White. They get a 2027 7th-round pick, and then the Rams get a 2026 7th-round pick. This is, to steal a term from you, Luke, this is a rearranging the chairs on the Titanic type move. Tre'Davious White is not a good player anymore. He's completely shot from the injuries. I don't really think that this benefits anybody.
Depth. I don't know how much it changes the actual lineup that the Ravens have on the field. And I think the Rams are totally fine without him. So whatever. 7th for a 7th. Yeah, it's a depth move. Doesn't move the needle much.
Yeah, it's just a swap from 2027 to 2026. So whatever
that's fine.
there. But
go ahead.
The final trade deadline deal was Khalil Davis, the backup interior defensive lineman from the Houston Texans, going to the San Francisco 49ers for a 2026 7th-round pick. And the 49ers are a team that is not enough. Like, they haven't had a good enough pass rush this year. They didn't go out and make any trades. They could have traded with the Titans for Sebastian Joseph Day or Arden Key or somebody better than Khalil Davis. I'm angry about that. My pettiness is coming through, and I don't care. But, San Francisco is a team that needed more help than this to get things back on track.
Yeah.
Chase Young is a guy who was out there who, San Francisco had their run-in with Chase Young, so maybe they're like, heck no, we're not doing that. But I just don't think this was enough for San Francisco, and I like the Rams and the Cardinals better than San Francisco at this point.
Yeah, not as much interior D-line help was truly available as you thought. Right. Maybe they were sniffing around Jeffrey Simmons and took this as a consolation prize.
Never.
I'm horrified to find out that that's who 94 on Houston is. After watching the Vikings play Houston and then scouting a little bit and also watching Cam Robinson, who the Vikings traded for, and watching him against Houston, I've seen some bad things happen to 94 in Houston. I'm not sure that guy should be on the field a lot. I think you probably could have done better if you were really trying to look for interior help, San Francisco.
Yeah, it doesn't make a lot of sense to me. But with that being said, that is going to do it for our NFL trade deadline recap episode. Going to be back tomorrow, breaking down a Thursday night football game that we've had some stinkers lately, but not this one. Ravens, Bengals, going to be excellent. Can't wait to dive into that. Luke, thank you so much for joining. For my co-host, Luke the Brain Braun, and me, the Madman, Tyler Rowland. That's going to do it for today's show. Make sure that you check out the afternoon edition of Locked On NFL with Tony Wiggins in the barbershop, breaking down all the big NFL news as well. Make sure that you get subscribed, stay subscribed for year-round free NFL content here on the Locked On NFL podcast. But with that being said, as I tell you guys every single day, stay safe out there.